Oh, so much great advice coming in there from GQ. Lots for you all to get from that one. We're now shifting from the world of customer service to a topic which kind of relates a little bit to the very first session we had today, which was veering into the world of the power of getting things more ethical, more sustainable, and paying attention to the full potential customer base, not just the obvious. And that's, see, you're all intrigued now, aren't you, about what's coming up? So let's bring on our next guest, Rafi, who's going to be doing one of our tech showcases. Hello, Rafi.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. For those of you who haven't come across our tech showcases before, these are 15-minute sessions where Rafi is going to take you through the tech of the company he works for. And Rafi, just very quickly before we get into it, because I've kind of mysteriously explained a little bit about what you do, but could you just, I'll bring the slides up, could you just very quickly outline who accessiBe are?
Absolutely. So about 5 years ago, the law in Israel changed as far as web accessibility, and it became absolute 100% law that websites have to be accessible to people with disabilities. Our founders realized that they had a web development company at the time, and they started looking into ways that this can be fixed. They realized that web accessibility is incredibly difficult to achieve manually, and for most small businesses, it's completely impossible because the cost is too high. And so they decided to try and find a solution with AI. I was lucky enough to join the company almost 2 years ago now, and we've grown to help over 100,000 websites protect themselves, not only from web accessibility lawsuits, but also make themselves accessible to everybody and make sure that everybody can shop at their store. And that's more or less it.
Excellent. Well, look, I am looking forward to finding out how this tech works, because doing this is a nightmare for many people. So anything that makes it better is good on my front. So Rafi, your 15 minutes starts now.
Awesome. So first things first, what is web accessibility, right? It's a set of rules, behaviors, code standards, and design guidelines meant to allow people with disabilities to effectively use websites. And this affects all different kinds of people with disabilities. While most of us tend to think of people who are blind when it comes to using the internet, there's also people with epilepsy and seizure-related disorders. And if you don't have your animations able to be stopped immediately, they can be physically harmed or even killed by these. On top of that, you have a very wide range of other people, people who might be aging into disabilities, people who might speak English as a second language. And that being the case, we try to make it as interactive and easy as possible for everybody to work with your website. The laws that are relevant here in the US are Section 508 and ADA Title III. Section 508 generally refers to large government organizations, whereas ADA Title III is everybody else. Long story short, the Department of Justice put out a ruling in 2018 that says that any business website must be accessible, but they said that the standard's reasonable effort. So the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are what is used now as the standard worldwide. Every single legislation out there, except for the ADA, refers to the WCAG as the standard for accessibility. So that's what we comply with. This is just a little bit of information on the lawsuit situation in the US. I won't go into too much of this because it's really depressing. What I will tell you is that the last time that I was outside my zip code with this Corona stuff was last February. I was in Las Vegas giving a presentation about accessibility, pretty much the same presentation. And I was interrupted by somebody who said that they run 60 locations of a payday loan company, and they got a demand letter for one location. Somebody was asking them for $10,000. So he contacted his lawyer. He said, what do I do? The lawyer says, okay, look, your websites are completely inaccessible and the law is very clear. You should pay the money and become accessible as quickly as you can. So that's what they tried to do. But the day that the check cleared, they got 59 more demand letters and had to settle for $600,000. So even if you think that you're a small organization and nobody's coming after you and nobody's looking, it is not only risky legally, it's also a moral imperative to make your website accessible. Plus, 26% of US adults, according to the CDC, live with a disability. So it's a significant potential part of your business that you might be losing out on. This is just a little bit of the competitive landscape of accessibility solutions. We are not, of course, the only solution out there. There are some that are completely automated that are generally free. I will just tell you what my dad told me. You get what you pay for. If it's free to low cost, it's probably not going to solve your entire problem. we spent a very long time working on accessiBe and working on everything that comes with it to make sure that it addresses many different types of disabilities and everything that's contained in the WCAG. The other solution that you have is manual services. And this is how accessibility has been done up until the advent of accessiBe, more or less. The problem is that it's too expensive in time and money. So even if you're a skilled developer, you're spending hours and hours and hours every time you update the website to fix the accessibility. If you're not a skilled developer, then you have to pay a skilled developer. And so either way, it's very expensive and it's not so effective either, because while it can be reasonably effective, one of the problems with manual accessibility is that there's always going to be a delay between the time that you update the website and the time that you update the website's accessibility. And another problem with that is that it's not feasible. There's 350 million websites out there today, and just in the US alone, and most of those are created with no-code CMS systems. So it can't be reasonably expected to go into a WordPress site or a Wix site and try and fix the accessibility. That's why we created accessiBe. It's a fully automated solution that's intended for business owners to be able to make themselves accessible without breaking the bank, and by ensuring that they're actually accessible to real people, not just a compliance product, but making sure that you're actually able to work with people with many different types of disabilities to provide them the services that you normally provide. We also rescan every 24 hours or every update, whichever comes first, to make sure that you're always in compliance and the statement of accessibility that we send you is still valid. Now, I'm stopping here just to mention this. It's very cool, very exciting that we had a $12 million round. We actually had a $28 million A round that recently closed. And the only reason that it's relevant is just to tell you that we're not going anywhere. We're not getting bought out anytime soon. We are going to be here growing and continuing to grow and continuing to provide web accessibility into the future. And also, this slide is a little bit outdated. I apologize. We just can't update this stuff fast enough. We're well over 100,000 websites right now. But what I love to say here is whether you're Burger King or Burger Joint on the corner, you get exactly the same service from us at exactly the same price. This is actually the accessibility statement that you get from us. It's a compliance requirement to meet the WCAG, but it also just goes into detail about everything that's been done to make your website accessible. We'll back that up with compliance audits just so that you can check every month and look into it. We also offer our ACE scanner, which is a proprietary scanner that checks out how accessible your website is. And you're welcome to run as many scans as you'd like, as often as you'd like, completely for free. Now, in the event that anybody approaches you or your client about web accessibility and says, hey, your website's not good enough, I can't use it, it's this, it's that. So you let us know immediately, and we'll do several things. Number one, we're going to do an audit. Because when somebody makes a complaint about your website not being accessible, they have to make a specific claim. They can't just say, hey, this website isn't good. They have to make it very specific about a specific element. And so we'll do an audit and screen record that audit and show you, yes, this is actually accessible. Then we'll send them a compliance overview that explains how to use our tool. We'll include a failures request master as well, which is a big old spreadsheet where they can log and document any kind of perceived accessibility failures. We'll send you your statement again so you have it handy, and we'll send you a suggested response. This is a form letter. Not to go too deep into it, because again, it's very depressing to talk about too many lawsuits, but most of the lawsuits that are coming from a place of people seeking settlements. Generally, the community of people with disabilities is not an incredibly litigious one. Most people with disabilities, if they visit your website and they can't use it, they're going to try and get in touch with you and ask you to either work with them on the phone or fix your website. Their first thought is not to sue you. That being said, there is certainly a profit incentive from certain law firms to extract settlements. And so our suggested response is a form letter that we've used on over 4,500 cases. And in more than 90% of the time, we don't even get a response to our suggested response, meaning that the lawyer on the other side chooses to drop the matter and move on to the next victim rather than continuing to engage further because they know that they're not going to be able to win. And again, we wish that wasn't the case, but we're glad that we're able to help so many of our clients prevent any kind of negative litigious matters. So This is our installation process. It's super easy, super simple, just one line of JavaScript code. Our accessibility interface will appear on your website within 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5. And then our remediation will start. So the AI goes to work on the back end, and usually within about 6 to 8 hours, but up to 48 hours, we say, your website will be compliant. You'll get that statement of accessibility from us. And the moment that you get that statement of accessibility, that's when our shot clock starts. Every 24 hours or every update, whichever comes first, we're going to do a full and complete scan of that website to make sure that it's still accessible. This is just a little bit of the differentiation between the two parts of our tool. We actually use multiple AI components here. So one side of the tool is sort of the accessibility interface side. I am no developer, but I am told by developers that the CSS changes are relatively simple. I have yet to believe that. That being said, the AI is the other side, and we have 2 different AI components. So we work with Iris and OCR to do our image recognition, and we have a contextual understanding engine as well. And the contextual understanding engine is getting better every day. It's actually exposed to, I think, more than 40 million data sets now, and it is capable of understanding what kind of website it's been put on. So if you put it on Zappos.com, it will know, oh, this is a shoe store. Or if you put it on a Ford dealership, it'll know this is a car dealership. And that way it will inform its decisions on everything else it needs to do. So accessiBe is fully session-based. We're not going to change anything on your website until somebody triggers it to be changed. This is what our interface looks like. And as you can see, we have a bunch of different profiles available for various disabilities to be addressed. There's some videos that are available here, and this is the end of the presentation itself. What I'd love to do now is switch over the screen share and move into a live presentation. Let me get the stop screen share now, and I will pull up the live presentation. All right, excellent. Thank you for your patience. Of course, usually when I do this, somebody's talking back to me.
Hey, Rafi, I'll talk back to you.
Hey, Thank you.
Whilst you get that set up, I have to say we've got some comments going on in the comments box. People are really pleased that you're here and that we're talking about this topic here. So so it's going down well. Do you want to have you got that new screen share set up so I can put
I have
it live
indeed,
for
madam.
you? Marvelous, right? There we go. It's You've got about exactly 5 minutes left. All yours.
Oh my God, I'm so good at this time management stuff. Well, thank you, Chloe. And your accent is always great to hear. Love the British accent. So the first profile I'll show you is Seizure Safe because it's probably one of the most important. Seizure Safe profile, like I said in the very beginning, people who have seizure-related disorders, epilepsy-related disorders can be physically harmed or even potentially killed by animations and flashing lights on your website. So it's very important to be able to turn those off. The visually impaired profile, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. It just makes everything bigger and brighter. We have a cognitive disability profile. This shows you how it makes it easier for people with cognitive disabilities to identify what are links, what are titles, what are various elements. Then we have an ADHD-friendly profile. Now, I don't know if you've been able to identify this in our call so far, but I'm a little bit high energy, so I actually like this one. I will generally add the hide images function because it lets me focus on things even easier than the regular profile. On top of that, we have the blind users and keyboard navigation button. And I always get a great question here, which is, Rafi, how does a blind user click that button? They can't see it. And I go, sir, you're absolutely right. They can't see it. So this is a very important point that a lot of people with disabilities use assistive technologies like a screen reader for someone who's blind or severely dyslexic, or for instance, a click stick for somebody who has motor impairments, or they may only be able to hit the tab key. That being the case, we have multiple systems that identify live assistive technology on someone's computer. So if somebody using a screen reader enters accessiBe, or enters a website with accessiBe, I should say, we'll send them a voice note automatically that says, hi, you've entered an accessible website. Please hit Alt-1 to turn on accessible mode. We also will turn on accessible mode automatically when somebody hits the tab key enough. As you can see, that's all I'm doing here. And if anybody wants to do more research, we actually put out a research paper a while back where we evaluated more than 10 million web pages, and we found what elements are most frequently not accessible and which ones are accessible. So about 50% of images are accessible, but 50% are not. And we assume that a lot of that is for SEO reasons and not for accessibility reasons. 98% of drop-downs, pop-ups, and forms are not accessible. And that means that the purchase process and the actual checkout process, the important physical processes on most websites, are not accessible by people with disabilities. So as an example, if I open this pop-up, I need to have a pop-up open in the corner as well that says pop-up panel, press escape to close, navigate with tab, reading out to screen readers. If it doesn't say that, then somebody who's using a screen reader may not know that they're in a pop-up. They may actually have to shut down their computer just to get out of your website, which is a terrible, terrible user experience. I can promise you that customer's not coming back. But with accessiBe, they can navigate everything really, really simply, and they'll get all the information they need. Now, one thing that's also important with this adjustment, that I'll turn off the adjustment now just so we can show you the lack of alt text, is alt text. So alternative texts are the way that people who use screen readers understand what's in an image. This website we coded without any alt text natively because we're using it as a demonstration to show, of course, how we insert alt text with AI. So as a demonstration, I'll turn on the accessibility adjustments now. And of course, I could just do that with the keyboard too, but it's easier this way. And you can see it comes up immediately. This is woman in blue denim jeans. If I inspect this image, I'm going to get woman in black tank top with arm tattoos. So that's more or less exactly what's there. There's a little bit of a give and take between how descriptive you want to be. But people who use screen readers are generally not cognitively impaired. They just can't see. They know that they're on a website. They know that they're shopping for clothes. So you don't need to tell them 2 paragraphs about the jeans. They know what they're looking at. Also, our various AIs come into play here to identify exactly what is behind these images. The last thing that I'll show you is just specific adjustments. So these color adjustments where you can change the background and the title colors to specific other colors, super, super important, because one of the problems with manual remediation, like we went over before, is that when somebody, you have to choose 2 colors. You have to choose a contrast ratio for your website. If your website's the same for everybody who experiences it, there are going to be some people out there who won't be able to see your contrast ratio right, because not everybody who's colorblind is colorblind the same way. That being the case, the only way to make sure that everybody can see the stuff on your website and the color contrast and everything properly is to let them customize their own experience. And this is not just for people with disabilities. It's also for people aging into disabilities, or people who don't think that they have a disability but just don't see that well, or people who speak English as a second language. We have the online dictionary right here. For instance, my grandmother, before she passed away, loved online shopping. And I guarantee you, if she'd had a tool like accessiBe, I would have had even less of an inheritance from her. She would have spent even more money online shopping. So this is something that can enhance your website, not just in a compliance sense and not just in a PR sense where you're sending the message that you're helping people, but in general for everybody.
Excellent. Rafi, I cannot believe how complex doing this right is, and when you go through how complex you can see why the custom solution would cost so much and why it makes so much sense to go with a tool like yours. So I suggest you go to the YouTube channel after you log off, because there's lots of questions coming in on there for you to get back to. But before we say goodbye, could you just let people know where they can find out more if they're going, yes, I need that?
Absolutely. So we have a brand new updated website from about 2 weeks ago, and we have, I think, over 100 new testimonials up there. So if you go to www.accessiBe.com, you will get to see all of that. You can also go through the link that eCommerce Tech is providing, so ecomtech.link/accessiBe, and that'll give you an extra 10% off if you end up purchasing a license from us. And if you don't, it's also totally fine. We'll be happy to answer your questions either way.
Brilliant. Well, Rafi, thank you so much for taking us all through something that's so important for so many people. It's been really lovely having you here.
It's been great being here. Thanks so much for having me.